Derek wrote a piece over at Philly Mag, a column on why this Jerry Colangelo stuff could be a little overstating bringing free agents into the organization. We had talked about it last week with Chris Broussard. He believes, Derek, that Jerry has given them credibility in terms of the free agency. I guess, number one, the question would be, would they even be in that market this offseason? And why do you think that Colangelo might be a little overstated that he could help this all out?
Well, I think credibility, sure. I do think he gives them credibility. I do think they will be a more active participant in the free agent market. I think the only part I really disagreed with Chris on was that they wouldn't have to overpay. Because I think the reality is, there are two real ways to attract a free agent, and it's either with money or it's with winning. And the Sixers just aren't at the stage where they can, a free agent of any real caliber is going to look at them and go, okay, I see a path where they're going to contend. I see a piece here, a piece there. We can do this in 1 or 2 years. You're just not going to lure a free agent like that.
I do think that this offseason will be different. I do think Jerry Colangelo will help. I do think, where I disagreed with Chris is just whether or not, he basically said the Sixers won't have to overpay. And, there are really two ways to attract a free agent. It's either with money or it's with a chance to win. And you look at some of the free agents, especially the unrestricted free agents, they're not going to look at the Sixers and see a clear path to winning. They're not going to look at Joel Embiid or Okafor or even Ben Simmons because everybody really recognizes that it takes a couple years for young kids to really hit their own. So I think in order to really attract a free agent of any real caliber, you are probably going to have to overpay.
Yeah.
Now, like I said in the article, you're going to have to do, or hope that they do, is overpay based on their current market value and not overpay based on what they can become and what they can grow into, or maybe a change in environment or being used in a different way, using analytics to maybe see someone who's underrated, or, Jerry's experience as a scouter and team builder to find a guy who maybe has more untapped potential than other people think. But I do think they're ultimately going to have to overpay. Like I said, the key is that they're not, they're overpaying market value, not what they'll become.
Derek Bodner covers the Sixers for Philadelphia Magazine, phillymag.com. He's at Derek Bodner, NBA. Derek, you also cover the draft, and I want to get your thoughts on last year. It seemed that pre-tournament, Okafor was the guy. By the end of the tournament, Karl Anthony Towns had passed him. Do you see any similar situation this year, or is it more difficult because Simmons did not play in the tournament?
Yeah, well, I think Towns had surpassed Okafor in most people's eyes earlier in the season. Maybe January, February. I think he was pretty well firmly established. There were some holdouts, and I remember Flip Saunders specifically in Minnesota was one of the ones who was unsure. But I think it happened a little earlier in the season than maybe Ingram's surpassing, or quote-unquote surpassing, because it's nowhere near unanimous right now, that it did this year. I don't think – clearly Simmons not playing in the tournament hurts. Hurt far more than that was the way LSU collapsed down the stretch, the way they reacted to adversity. And that team was just never really the same once they lost Hornsby. He was a consistent shooter that LSU and Simmons very specifically needed. And he was an upperclassman who had a calming influence on that young squad. And they didn't react to adversity, and they looked like they gave up. And that's a far bigger concern than whether or not they made the tournament, I think.
Yeah, now, obviously, a lot of people are excited because of Buddy Hield. He's still playing, and not only is he still playing, he's playing very well. How has his tournament run helped his draft stock?
Well, I think he's mostly been doing what he's been doing all year, which isn't to take anything away from Buddy Hield, but, he's not exactly doing anything new. He's been this good all year. I think it's obviously helped. Anytime you can play at a high level when the most number of eyes are on you, and it's also the last thing that decision makers are going to see, it can't help. It can't do anything but help. Is it going to vault him into the top three? I'm not sure. I think when all is said and done, he still has some, I think you'd want to see him create maybe a little more for his teammates than he does. Maybe finish a little bit more off the dribble than he does. Although he does it, it's just some people question whether he's really going to do it at a high level, at the next level. I think he's the type of guy who's going to play a lot more off the ball than he does at Oklahoma. And that's not a bad thing. But I do think someone's going to talk them into, maybe a player with more upside or who can be a little bit more well-rounded. But he's the type of guy who can go anywhere realistically from 3 to 10. And it wouldn't surprise me if he went anywhere in that range.
Sixers have 4, and he's on the board. Chris Dunn's on the board. Somebody more traditional point guard style. Buddy Hield make more sense, or do you want to see them take point guard at 4?
Well, I'm not locked into a position, and I'm not entirely in love with Chris Dunn. In fact, after 3, I'm really not in love with anyone in this draft. I think they all have certain aspects that are questionable whether they're going to translate. I think they all have certain deficiencies that are going to take some effort to overcome. One thing I will say about Hield, a lot of these guys, like I said, because they're so they each have their own flaws and each have their own areas that they have to improve upon. It's going to come down to who you really trust as a person, as a worker, as a decision maker, as a guy who's going to be open to criticism and critique and coaching. And you won't find very many players in this draft that rate out better in that regard than Buddy. So if you're going to ask me to take a gamble on a guy high, he's certainly going to be in that conversation because he has that very NBA skill and also because he's a great kid.
Right now, I know we're a ways off the draft process, but do you have your favorite in the clubhouse?
In what regard?
Who's your top player right now? Who's your favorite? Who's your guy at number 1?
It's still Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
And he's been picked apart and he has his holes, both in terms of, like I said, how he reacted and in his game. But he has just such a real preternatural feel to the game, an ability to see the court that so few players really do. And you combine that with the 6'10" frame, the athleticism he has, I'm willing to gamble on that. And, if you interview him, the Sixers go and they interview him, they really do their homework on him. Maybe something is a red flag. Maybe the work ethic's not there. Maybe he's entitled or something that's going to prevent him from reaching his upper tier. Maybe that changes it. But right now I would have, and I like Brandon Ingram quite a bit, I would have a very hard time still passing on Ben Simmons. Yeah,
you wonder, I know some people think that Simmons is the can't-miss guy, but do you almost feel like a team, I don't want to say pressured into, but that they feel they have to take Ben Simmons even if they think Ingram's a better fit for their team?
Well, I hope they don't feel that way. Kristaps Porzingis, Jahlil Okafor situation, and they have denied that. And, who knows whether that's really true. But if that did, forget whether you prefer Okafor or Porzingis. Just from a what they're doing standpoint, that's concerning. And if they go into this draft thinking, I can't pass on Ben Simmons, even if I don't believe in him, I can't pass him because of the fans, then they're in very real trouble.
And it sounds like you are leaning, Derek, if I'm reading you right, that you would almost prefer the Laker pick not to convey till next year.
Yeah. There's one situation I do like, and nobody's going to want to hear this. There is a 7'1", 18-year-old European kid who I like quite a bit, and he's not playing a whole lot. And he has a buyout for this year, but nobody's sure exactly how much it costs. Again, most Sixers fans don't want another front court player, but he's just an incredible talent. And if he fell to 4, I would be okay with that. But yeah, that 2017 draft is loaded. The Lakers will probably improve. But even if that pick ends up at 7 next year, I think it could end up being a better player than at 4 this year. So I'm willing to take that chance for sure.
Derek Bodner, Philadelphia Magazine, covers 76ers, the NBA draft. Still a little ways off, but the draft time and the tournament, always interesting to see as a lot of people tweeting at me about Buddy Hield. I kind of agree with you. I question what his position in the NBA would be, whether or not he would be the same electric scorer that he is. Or you never know. He could be a guy that slips through the crack, a little small. A lot of people say, is he another Steph Curry kind of guy that just has that natural scoring ability? That remains to be seen. We'll see what happens when the draft gets a little closer. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.